All right. Welcome. If you were just joining, this is the kind of getting a view into the green room for the webinar as we wait for people to join here. Looks like they're being added quickly. Alex, thanks for joining us on this webinar. Excited to get things kicked off in the next 2 minutes or so.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me. I have to say, I'm grateful y'all did a lot of the hard work pulling this data together that we're talking about today, and it is fascinating. So I'm really excited.
Cool. Most importantly, are you a football fan at all?
Is it bad if I say no?
I think it's only bad if you say you're not an Eagles fan, because we are based out of Philadelphia. So it's important for me. Well, we're going to have to figure that out later. Maybe that'll be at the Ask Me Anything session.
Sure. Here's the benefit, right? I'm not particularly tied. So here we go. I'm an Eagles fan today. We're doing it.
So
I
we're
support.
really connecting on multiple levels. Number one, you're not a customer of Campus ESP and you're not a confirmed Eagles fan. So you are the most independent person I could possibly invite to this webinar.
There you go. We do have something in common though. Twins.
Yes.
It's exciting. You're a glimpse into my future of twins, because you're about ready to send them off to college, basically.
That's a slightly nauseating way of saying it, I'm sure. But yeah, my twins are they're in 11th grade. And how old are your kids?
They're 21 months.
Big
so we got a ways.
All right, well, if you're just joining us, we're about to get started in another 30 seconds. We're just letting people join here. And we'll get going in another. Heck, let's just get going right now. What do you think, Alex?
Let's do it. There's a lot to cover. I have to say, it's a tall glass for what we got to cover in 30 minutes.
All right, well, we're going to start off with this slide that we can cover, which is introductions. I don't know why my team has pixelated me on this. I mean, you get the clarity of the photo here, but this is we've known each other for 9 years. I feel like my picture is probably from 9 years ago. For people who haven't met me, I am Dave Becker. I'm the CEO and co-founder of Campus ESP. I'm going to be your host today, taking you through top trends in family engagement for 2023. And I am joined by Alex Brown, who I've known for 9 years, who is the new president of AHEPPP and who is also running parent programs at UCLA. So Alex, we'd love for you to introduce yourself and before we get started.
Absolutely. As already stated, Alex Brown. I've been working at UCLA for 10 years. The majority of that time has been focused on parent and family engagement. But recently in 2019, my purview actually expanded to also include the student organizations that sit within alumni affairs and supporting our alumni board of directors. So I have a unique lens of what I call the life cycle of engagement. Which is how are we getting students in, getting them through, and then keeping them connected post-graduation. And what's the biggest trend of all of that is families are a huge part of each and every point of it.
Cool. Well, sounds like a really easy job. Sounds like everything is pretty easy for you.
Easy every day.
Well, thank you for joining. That is the most important thing. And then as far as just this webinar, last year we actually had 4 sources of data, which was a lot for us. We're trying to make sense of all the different trends that are out there. This year we have about 10 sources of data. We're going to send that information out. So I'm going to mute you real quick. You got it. Okay, good. We're going to send that information out after this webinar, so you have access to it. But I know a lot of people won't have time to actually go through all the details. So that's what this webinar is about, which is taking you through the top 5 takeaways from a parent and family involvement perspective. Hopefully, get you thinking about ways and things you can do at your university or college. Logistics. I'm sure you've never seen this slide before. Lines are on mute, so if you get super emphatic or excited about something and start screaming, we will not hear you. Use the chat or QA feature to ask questions. We're actually going to have an Ask Me Anything session at the end of this. So we will accumulate those questions to the end, and then hopefully Alex and I can answer a couple of those questions for you. And then we'll send the recording and the slide deck to everyone who registered. So our goal is to try to get through this in 30 minutes, at least until the Ask Me Anything session. But we'll send you the recording afterwards. So hopefully you can sit back and get a couple takeaways for your institution. Before we do that, just a little bit more about our sponsor, which is Campus ESP. So if you've never heard of Campus ESP, welcome. We work with over 300 colleges and support communication for 4 million families. If you think about parent engagement as kind of like connected to the student life cycle, as Alex was talking about, different stages in that student life cycle, Campus ESP offers different modules to support parent communication from the student admit to graduate stage, from the prospect to admit stage. We also have a FERPA management module, which helps with access to student records and decreasing parent phone calls. And then finally, we also have a parent giving module, which I know, as crazy as this sounds, also supports parent giving. Well-named module right there. So we have everything to help support your parent engagement needs if you want to go that direction. And if you want to learn more about Campus ESP, you can just go to campusesp.com, click on the blog and resources section. There's a whole bunch of resources to just kind of get you up to speed on parent engagement, parent involvement, and how it can help you. All right, that was the commercial. Now let me flip it over to Alex, who is the new president of AHEPPP. If you've never heard of AHEPPP, would love if Alex, if you could take a couple seconds here to explain kind of the goal of AHEPPP and how it can support folks that are on this call.
Absolutely. So thank you for the space. AHEPPP is a professional organization that really supports any practitioner working with parents and families. So whether they're in student affairs, enrollment management, or like me sitting in alumni affairs, it is an excellent network of over 220 colleges and universities, which I think puts us around 800 plus or minus campus-based practitioners, sharing best practices, benchmarking, providing a whole slew of tools and both in-person and virtual opportunities to learn from one another and how we do this work as best as possible.
Cool, thank you. What is really exciting for me, or super awkward about this presentation, is UCLA is not a customer of Campus ESP. So the things we're about to discuss here today are really about family engagement, parent involvement, but there's not like one way to solve the problem. I've known Alex for 9 years. We calculated that. I was at an AHEPPP conference where I met her, so highly endorse AHEPPP as a great organization that can help, support your family engagement needs. All right, so we are going to jump into things. We have 5 big takeaways, and I'm going to take you through some of the data, and then Alex is going to assist me with some of the, I guess, the color commentary around it. So the first takeaway I wanted to talk about is parents want to hear from you more than ever. And I know this feels like kind of a no-brainer, but let's talk about some of the specifics. When we run this survey, and we've now done it for over 3 years, we are now at the point where 85% of families want to get communication from you or expect communication at least weekly. And I always think this is just a crazy stat. I'm not saying that you should be communicating weekly. I'm just saying that that is their expectation. And what's really crazy is that that stat has gone up from 2020, around the start of the pandemic, to 2021. We weren't surprised to see the increase in 2021, but in 2022, it's still going up, and it's the same rate generally for families of prospective students and families of current students. And when you drill into that and see the types of families who are looking for different types of support, we consistently see that email is the #1 preference for families. We see that 96% of the time, email is the biggest preference for how they expect communication from you. So if you're not sure where to start, email is a great place to kind of kick off your parent engagement. But increasingly, we're also seeing text message be a really important channel, especially for some of the specific segments of families here: Black families, Hispanic families, families with lower incomes, and first generation. So it really depends on who you're trying to reach. Lots of different ways to reach those families. So let me pull in Alex here. So at UCLA, how are you currently engaging with families today? And have you seen one channel that works best across all of them?
It's a great question. Also just fascinating. So we do a biannual survey of our families, and, asking a whole slew of questions. One of them is communication. So email is definitely the continued cornerstone of the way we communicate with our families, whether that be our quarterly newsletter or invitations to different events and other highlighted, pieces of information. But social media is a close second. We're on Facebook and Instagram. I have to say those have been the most successful channels. We've tried to and dabbled in a couple other spaces, but it just quite hasn't hit quite as much as Facebook and Instagram. But the third data point I just wanted to share that I thought was interesting around the text message piece is that was something we saw come up more so than ever in this year's survey. We asked the question of, preferred other formats of communication, and 33% of folks that responded to that question said text message. So I think we've got our work cut out for us in regard to a strategy around that. I have to say, one thing I want to talk a lot with our staff about before we jump into it is when, what, and how much, right? We don't want to have text message, which can be, I think, an integral tool of communication, turn into white noise. So those are, again, similar data points, and loving to see that we're seeing that across the nation.
Yeah, we see text message increasing as well. We have a really crazy stat at Campus CSP where I think it's close to 50% click rate through text messages when you send them to families. So increasingly, it's important for families. They have to opt into that. So you're always going to get higher levels of engagement. But if you're trying to reach, especially if you're an HBCU or an HSI, I think text messaging is really an important tool for you to reach those families. All right, thank you. Let's keep rolling here. We're going to go fast and furious. So the second takeaway, which is pretty obvious, is students are stressed, parents can help. And we have some really interesting stats here, somewhat depressing stats, I would say, is that 89% of students feel stressed very often, 79% feel anxious very often, 74% feel worried very often. And if you're a parent of a student in this demographic, this is probably not surprising to you. You've seen COVID just exacerbate things for them as far as mental health and stress. And it's a really, really big issue. Student retention is low. This is a narrative that, of course, continues in 2023. The overall retention rate is in the 60s. For full-time students, it's a little bit higher in the 70s, but it's always an area of opportunity every single year. Another stat that's kind of interesting that kind of plays into this is that 4 out of 10 families communicate with their college students daily. I was just on a webinar with Raquel Bermeo from RNL yesterday, and we profiled this stat. And what's interesting is you think of this kind of communication being over text message. It's not. It's also actually phone calls and video calls as well. So lots of families are communicating with lots of students on a high level. And then the other stat that I wanted to pull into this conversation is that we find at Campus ESP, when schools are sharing academic and financial information, elements of the student's record with families, we actually see student retention rates higher for those students, on average 8%. And we released a study, I believe, last year where we profiled 9 different universities, and across all of them, they have different retention rates, as you would expect. But when families are getting information about financial aid, holds, student status changes, we actually see a positive effect on student retention. And what's really interesting is that we see the biggest impact for Hispanic students, for Black students. And so oftentimes these are the families that just don't have enough information to know how to help their students. So it's kind of an interesting trend here. So Alex, I wanted to kind of just throw this over to you. Do you feel parents play a role in student success? And when you look at, student success, which is kind of like a broad category, where do you think they play the biggest role?
Well, I guess the answer, obviously, in the fact that I do my job, is absolutely yes. Parents play a role. In my 10 years, in particular, working with families at UCLA, I've continued to see that year over year. The engagement evolves and is ever increasing. And to your point, just on the stress, the stress stats, I think that's something we're also seeing is really important. A place that families can really be partners with the university is, and this is something you and I anecdotally had spoken about, students aren't dropping out because of low grades. Like you're saying, it's not necessarily, oh, they're failing classes. It's the many other extracurriculars and or life circumstances that are impacting their ability to graduate and, succeed, quote unquote, in that way. I think if we're going to quantify it. So the answer is absolutely a resounding yes. And I think the more to what you said about communication, the more we can think about communicating some of those essential elements of campus life to families, it really does help students in being able to focus on what they need to do to get through their time at a university.
I mean, you're kind of on the front lines, and not to put you on the spot here, but are you getting more calls from families that are concerned about mental health and about safety? I mean, is that something that you just definitely see day in and day out?
100%, yes. We actually just our whole agenda for our parents council meeting this past 2 weekends ago, we had our director of counseling and psychological services and a representative from University Police Department, because that's what families
Yeah.
want to hear about. And those folks are our ambassadors. So we wanted to make sure they had that information in hand when engaging with their peer group. So 100% families are really involved in the safety pieces, and they're really concerned about their students' ability to navigate what is a very stressful time. So yeah, I mean, the data blows me away, but it's absolutely spot on.
Cool. All right, thank you. Let's keep on rolling to some other trends that we're seeing here. Enrollment declines continue. Parent engagement can make a difference. Again, probably something that a lot of you are seeing. But when you look at the stats, and there's actually some new research that just came out today, the 2-year enrollment decline is around 4.2% since fall 2020. And it's uneven. It's different based off of where you're at. So here's a map that actually highlights the states in red, where there are some of the largest declines. So, depending on what state that you're in, you might be feeling this or not feeling it. Campus ESP is based in Philadelphia. We're in one of these red states that is actually having an enrollment crisis. We're right next to New Jersey, who is not. The good news is our sports teams are better than them. So I guess we're happy about that. But if you're in one of these schools in the red states, of course, this is something that's probably always being highlighted to you. Here's the thing where parents are involved. 97% of parents are involved with their students' college search. These are actually my twins at a recent college fair in Philadelphia. I don't know if they look like they know what they're doing, but I can tell you they do not know what they're doing. I like my daughter's kind of like head side nod right there. She's like, can I stop posing for this picture yet? But it's overwhelming to them. And, parents play a role when it comes to deciding or helping their students decide what college to enroll in. We see this at Campus ESP, which is we see that when you reach out directly to colleges and engage with them directly, we see that student yield rates are on average 5% higher. We see that across all different schools, sometimes more, sometimes less, but always around 5%. And the reality is parents are very influential when it comes to student enrollment and yield. So if you're getting less data at the top of the funnel, if you're looking for ways to partner with parents or if you're looking for ways to attract students, really engaging with their families is generally a pretty successful way to do that. So Alex, I'm guessing UCLA does not have an enrollment problem, but are there ways that I guess you do partner with your enrollment and admission peers that I guess could serve as kind of like some ideas for the people who are on this call?
Yeah, so I'll acknowledge UCLA is in a pretty unique position with its admissions. I think we got just shy of 175,000 applications for fall 2022.
Oh, wow.
So, I think and that has its own problems, right? But to your point of partnership, so I have to say our enrollment team has been incredible partners since I've been at UCLA, but even before then, in recognizing the role parents play. A couple ways that we've partnered and are just engaged in the yield process is everything from our materials available at any and all yield events offsite. And then when it comes to our admitted students day, what we call it Bruin Day here, we have a pretty significant footprint right in the center of that event. Because again, to your point, families are helping in making this decision. And so I think for anyone in any stage of partnership, one piece of it is just presence, right? Letting families know there is a resource for them on the campus. And I'll say what it was usually very popular, or our bread and butter, is the helpline, knowing that someone they can call and speak to a person, right? They're not going to get a phone tree and ask some of those questions that are pertinent. I think right from the get, that provides families a space of understanding, like, I am also a part of this experience with my student, and this university values my partnership. So I'd say, again, just presence at the very minimum is super, super helpful in the enrollment stage.
Those are great points. I think it's, like you're saying, kind of like being intentional, having that presence, starting the journey with my kids. Hopefully they become college students. Like, there aren't even ways to indicate interest as a parent. Like, I have to complete RFIs, requests for information, like I'm a student. And so I think being intentional, knowing that parents are going to be involved, and that their presence is accepted is important, even for schools like UCLA. I'm sure you get so many parents asking questions out there.
Yeah, well, even beyond, I think what you said is accepted, but also valued. I think there's even a difference and a nuance between that. So having families as a valued partner in their student success is really important.
Cool. All right, we're doing great on time, by the way. We are getting through it. I know you and I were both skeptical. Could we get through all these trends in half an hour? But we know people are busy, so we want to keep on rolling here. Takeaway number 4 is Hispanic enrollment continues to rise. And again, I think this is one of those stats that everybody kind of knows, but when you really look at the data and you go into it and you look at it from a wider angle, like from the 1980s into the 90s to 2000s, you can see that from 2000 to 2020, it's gone up by 287%, which is really, just astounding, I would say. And what we're seeing, of course, is the number of HSIs, Hispanic serving institutions, is rapidly increasing. In the 1990s, it was 137. It's gone up to close to 600 right now. There are emerging HSIs as well. In 2020, that was 362, and in 2021, 393. So just seeing a real, increase in focus in this demographic, obviously. We can tell you internally at Campus ESP, when we look at one measure of engagement with families is email open rate. And when we look at specifically our HSIs that are using Campus ESP, the overall email open rate is high. It's at 58%. But for Hispanic and Latinx families in those schools, it's higher at 70%. So you're just seeing not only that there are more Hispanic students and families out there that are being involved, but they engage at an even higher level than maybe you might expect. So, Alex, let me throw this back over to you. And I probably should have done my research here, but is UCLA an HSI, or is that an area of focus for you? And I guess, what does that mean for UCLA?
Yeah, funny you should ask. I think that's been a central focus more recently. So not currently, but the University of California's Hispanic Serving Institution, so HSI initiative, was launched in 2018, and UCLA has a goal of HSI designation by 2025. So we're working towards that, and it's a hot topic of conversation on our campus right now.
Do you do anything as you prepare for that? Like, are there specific programs that are underway? I know a lot of people focus on multi-language support, Spanish, but I know it goes beyond that. Or is there anything that jumps out at you that UCLA is focused on?
Specifically with parents and families, we're still trying to get our arms around that. We do exactly what you're saying. We're working to create accessibility through translation of a lot of our materials, and also just some of the programming we offer. But I think there's some really amazing opportunities to engage families in this area of educational attainment and how to navigate through it. So that peer-to-peer connection. My hope is that we can build out an ambassador program in the coming years. So, we're not just getting them here, but helping them get through. So it's kind of a larger goal of ours, supporting and serving.
Yeah, it is. it is an interesting area, an area of opportunity. I think most schools that we talk to at this point are thinking about Hispanic, Latinx families, what they can do there, and going beyond just translation support too. So it's definitely a hot topic. And I believe there's some resources even on our website that talk to that you can jump into if you're interested in more details there. All right. So last takeaway is you're forced to do more with less. Staff retention is increasingly critical. I mean, we hear this at every single college that we go to. I've been in education technology for 25 years. I spent 14 at Lucian, SunGard, SCT, and I just have never seen as much change and as much stress put on colleges, universities, and staff as I have over the last couple of years. I think where some of that is coming from is parents expect more. 40% of families want to be more involved in their students' experience at the institution. This is from an RNL and Campus ESP study that actually we just released yesterday. I actually think this number is low. I think it's actually higher than that based off of some other information that I've seen recently too. 48% of families attended family weekend last year. So about half have attended family weekend. And then 94% of families have visited campus since their student enrolled. So these are really, really high numbers. And just parent expectations, parent involvement levels are high, not only from the communication perspective, but they need support if they're going to come to campus, if they're going to become more involved, and they're generally not taking no as an answer. We combine that data with some of the data from the AHEPPP national survey from 2021, and there were some services that parent programs wish they could provide. So first off, not every college or university has an office of parent programs. That's number one. But the ones that AHEPPP did survey still don't have access to resources about providing additional events. They're looking to add more staff. They need help with electronic resources. And it just is growing. And I think, Alex, you're really at the forefront of that day in and day out, not only at UCLA, but also talking with members of AHEPPP. But this is the stat. I know my marketing team and I, we were like, this kind of blew us away the most, which is the Great Resignation. Hear it a lot from lots of different people, but it's impacting higher ed. And the stat is 57% of higher education employees are at least somewhat likely to leave their role in the next year. So I know Captain Obvious here, but over half are looking to potentially leave their role next year. Sounds crazy to me. I know as the CEO of Campus ESP, that would totally freak me out at Campus ESP. So I guess for you, Alex, like, not to get too into it, but what does that mean for you personally? Do you see it getting better over the next couple of years? And what are the things you're hoping to see to maybe change this direction?
Yeah, I mean, as someone who manages a team of people and every one of them is so essential to our day to day, that's a scary stat to think 57% of my team could be gone next year. But I think to answer that question, is it going to get better? I don't feel that in the immediate future that's the case. I think campuses need to make adjustments to meet the needs and interests of their staff, and in particular the younger generation in the workforce. COVID blew the doors off of this idea of we must be on campus 5+ days a week to provide the services that we do. And so now we need to figure out how to acknowledge and then get the tools in place to really navigate what a hybrid workforce looks like. And I think the sooner we do that, the better off we'll be. But also, just to speak to that stat, UCLA was not immune to the Great Resignation, being part of a variety of searches, whether for my team or otherwise. Like, we saw smaller candidate pools, we saw less qualified candidates, we experienced failed searches. It's tough out there. And so again, making sure that we're an appealing option for candidates is going to be important. In addition, my network of colleagues looking at AHEPPP and folks, there was an immense turnover in folks that did this work, either directly or peripherally. And I think a lot of that comes from either this burnout to the stats you were pointing out before with families and their desire to continue to be more and more involved, and also realizing that folks can make more money or have more flexibility in other industries. So at the core of it, from a supervisor standpoint, I think a lot about how do I make sure my staff has the tools that they need to do what I'm asking them to do. And on the broader scale, I think it's really important for administrators to think about that. What am I asking my team to do? And am I giving them the tools and the resources, human, financial, tech, to do that every day in a sustainable way?
Yeah, I feel like there's just so much knowledge lost too when somebody leaves, and replacing it, like, when you have all these different burdens on you, more parents, more families, more students, more pressure on an enrollment side, you don't have time for training. So, I mean, how do you even keep pace with it? So
Yeah.
I
Yeah,
guess you're saying the same thing I guess
we are.
what I'm saying here. So,
Yeah.
cool. Well, I know you were skeptical. I honestly was kind of skeptical, like that we would get through all the stats in 30 minutes, but we did. We put that into the invite that we get through everything in 30 minutes. We did. I'm really excited that we could. If you want to get into more of a deep dive on this stuff, we have two opportunities. Number one, we're going to continue this with an Ask Me Anything session over the next 15 or 20 minutes here. And it looks like we do have some questions, and we'll pull in Melissa Greiner, our third member of our team, to kind of ask some of those questions to us. But if you are going to be at NASPA over, I guess it's in beginning of April, we're going to be there. We're going to have like kind of a pre-conference there. So if you want to learn more about parent and family engagement, engage with some of your peers, see some awesome keynotes, and also have a great happy hour. Please join us in Boston. And then, again, that's at the front end of NASPA. You can see more information on our website. But beyond that, Alex, this is the point where, number one, I say thank you for participating. I know we kind of threw this at you last minute, and it's great to have you, participating, and I've personally enjoyed it. So thank you.
Absolutely. Again, I gotta say, I love the stats and everything you pull together. This is so helpful to anyone working in higher ed, period, but especially trying to get their arms around what parent and family engagement looks like. So it's great.
Yeah, I remember this, like, I mean, they're compared to like 9 years ago when we met, like there wasn't all this data and there wasn't all this widespread agreement that parent and family engagement can make a difference. So things have definitely changed. COVID's probably hastened some of that. But yeah, again, thank you for taking time out of your busy day. We've heard some background noise there, so there's a lot.
I know
There's a lot going on.
the glamour of higher ed. I'm working in cube spaces, so here we are. We got everyone participating in our webinar today.
All right. Well, thank you. So let's open up to some questions. Hopefully, we can provide some good answers. Melissa's on the line with us, and I see over here on my other monitor that there are some questions.
Got a lot of them, actually. So I'm glad we saved some time. I'll start here at the top. We've all heard about the upcoming enrollment cliff. Looking at the slides with the enrollment decline map, would you say that it has already actually started?
I don't know. To me, the demographic cliff has been out there. I think it's supposed to start like 2025 is like, and I always tell like my friends who have kids who are about to go to college are like, great time to look at colleges, because the demographic cliff is going to make more schools try to, be more aggressive about recruitment. But I mean, what we're definitely seeing is the shifting demographics, right? Like whether there's going to be this cliff, you're definitely seeing the shifting demographics of less enrollment from white students, more enrollment from Hispanic students. We know those students have higher levels of family engagement. And if you believe that those trends are going to continue, then I would say parent-family engagement is also going to continue to go up and up. So I would say family engagement even more critical, whether we're at the demographic cliff, about to go over it, or where we're at. I think right now it's front and center for a lot of schools. I don't know, Alex. I mean, I feel like that's probably the same thing with UCLA and some of the the HSI initiatives we were talking about, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and I think it's like, could you pull out your crystal ball and know if we're hitting that cliff yet? I don't know. I think it's a big question, but all of your stats are pointing to the trend is going to come. If it started, I don't know.
All right, changing topics a little bit. What methods do you recommend to get demographics of the family members who are engaging with the school? If they're opening up messages, they're engaging in other ways, that this individual is having some trouble kind of figuring out who is engaging with the content that they're putting out.
I don't know. I think if you have Campus ESP, and I know who I can see who's sending this to me, then I think there's ways in Campus ESP that you can see that information. And I would also say that it's very seasonal. Like that is probably the biggest thing, which is like, generally families need information about financial aid, but not at the beginning of the school year when they're all focused on their students going to college. And that has actually some of the lowest click rates. So it's very seasonal. I think there's lots of different tools out there that can provide it to you. And I guess I would say there are some great, I would recommend AHEPPP there. I think you learn from other people having gone through it. There's kind of like a spectrum of like a maturity model of like where people are at in the parent engagement path. Some schools just are starting to send newsletters. Some schools like UCLA have been doing it for years. Alex, you pretty much built your own system from scratch. You're not using Campus ESP. You're building it around social media and email. Are there things that you look to if a school doesn't have Campus ESP to help there?
Yeah, we use a CRM system, and so we can track our email click rates in particular, and trace that back to profiles and use some of the demographics there. It's obviously a bit more labor intensive to do that. And on the flip side, though, I think there's a lot of great analytics on social media that are built in. So we do take advantage of that and look at, again, how folks are engaging with our different posts. And I think we're able to pull demographic data and kind of snapshot what that looks like as well.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of technology tools out there. I think, for a lot of the schools that we talk to, technology can be a barrier and you just need help going through it. So I of course love Campus ESP, but I think some of the value we provide is we become kind of an extension of your team. We help scale your team, help you kind of navigate technology if it's not something that's maybe your biggest strength. Yeah. Just made Mel cough there. Okay.
Sorry about that. This is live. I wasn't on mute for a second. Alex, this one's more for you. How are you balancing messaging of including parents and making them feel informed, but also encouraging student independence and agency?
The language we choose, 100%. We're very particular about using the term students, not children, not kids. We're very intentional when we're saying things like, your student should explore X, your student can take advantage of Y. We make sure that language is focused on how a student can fill in the blank, utilize or take advantage of a particular resource, but letting families just know that resource exists.
Alex, when do you get started with that? Like, is it summer of first? Is that where you jump into it to really reach families and set those expectations?
Yeah, immediately we're using that language. At no point I'm trying to say the word like your child. So when I'm presenting at orientation in the summer, I'm saying your student, and this opportunity is for your student. And same thing, we tee up all of our campus partners to use that similar language.
And you start at orientation, or like what's the starting point that you engage for families of current students?
Families of current students, technically, orientation is the first point at which they're a fully registered student, but as I already mentioned, we're in partnership with enrollment at our yield events all the way through spring. We also have a really strong presence at move-in weekend, because again, that's a great place to capture a lot of folks that are just coming in and maybe figuring out what way is up.
Cool. All right, Mel. What's the next one?
I know I've
Any
got
other-
a ton of them here, so I'm trying to like find ones that maybe are duplicates to make sure we're focusing our time here. With the exception of admissions events that parents attend, what are other items that you offer to parents specifically that are not admissions focused? Things about mental health awareness, safety, etc. Can you speak to that and what kind of participation you see?
It's again one of these tall orders. A couple ways that we've been doing this. So we actually embarked on podcasts because naturally podcasts are pretty popular, can be engaged with in a variety of spaces and at different times. So we do speak with a whole slew of different campus partners, student representatives, other parents as guests on this podcast and touching on those hot topics. They've been pretty popular. And then, as I've already mentioned, the social media space, you can't go wrong there just because so many people are scrolling through, and it's a great way to get little snippets of information out to folks to kind of entice their interest in learning more and make sure you're getting some of those key links and resources out to families at anytime basically.
One of the things we hear is trying to get off of social media because of just how much time it takes. Because you do focus on social media and you've been successful with it, which is great. Like, can you talk to us a little bit more about like how much time you spend? What is your social media strategy? I guess I would say.
Sure, it's evolved over years as social media has. We employ student interns. So, for those that are trying to figure out how to do this with maybe limited budgets or limited staff, student interns are amazing. They're obviously digital natives and they know the ins and outs and the coolest things and infographics and all of that. But we leverage their expertise in that space. And then we help kind of guide the content based on our trends. So our team really looks at the cyclical trends of what is the hot topic of this quarter or this month, and try to get that out in a variety of different ways. The other thing we've seen ticking up in terms of just engagement is using the messaging, or DMs as they call it. And we put a auto response on those because I think that's really important to set expectations for folks outside of our typical office hours. If you private message us at midnight on Saturday, well, you probably won't get a message back until Monday, but helping to set some of those expectations. And again, using the tools that are already built in is really important. So it's thinking through content, building that out in advance, again, leveraging our student interns and their expertise, and keeping things kind of short, sweet, high level, allowing families to kind of pick and choose their own adventure of how to get more information as needed.
Cool.
Dave, we definitely got a bunch of questions at various points of today's presentation about the retention case study and the results that you shared earlier. And I think one of the biggest themes is people are trying to figure out how we are sharing information and where FERPA comes into that process. So can you speak a little bit to how schools can mitigate the FERPA waivers and the requirements by law required there, but still get parents the information that they're after?
Yeah, I mean, FERPA is confusing for a lot of people because you go to different schools, they will interpret FERPA differently. You go to different departments within the schools, they will interpret differently. You go to, what people thought about FERPA 5 years ago versus 10 years ago versus. So, I mean, the intent of FERPA is really to give students control over their academic and financial records. I think everybody can agree on that. But most students want their parents to have access. So one of the crazy stats for me is many years ago, we surveyed parents and we said, do you have your students' IDs and passwords and at the college level? And 61% admitted to that. So I there's always bias in these surveys. I expected it's actually a higher rate than that. So they're very involved, and I'm not saying it's right. I'm certainly not saying it's right. So what we do at Campus ESP is we provide a way for parents to make the request. It's very like Facebook style. So parents make the request, students receive the request, and then students can decide how much to share, how little to share, and it's put into that same kind of portal view that parents get the regular information they get around, academic calendar and financial aid. So it's all in one place. And then generally what we see is when we send out alerts when student status changes, specifically around financial aid, holds, and student status change, financial aid, holds, and student status changes, like going from full-time to part-time, we see a retention impact there. We do not see a retention impact when parents access grades, to Alex's earlier point, or retention impact around how quickly you send the bill or how many times you nudge them about the bill. The retention impact is specifically identified around financial aid, like unmet financial aid requirements and making sure that parents are nudging their students to complete those requirements, lifting those holds, and understanding whether they're at risk of losing their financial aid because they went from full-time to part-time. So we always, at Campus ESP, we're like, wow, what a no-brainer. But the reality is if you're like, wow, that sounds great, let's launch that tomorrow, the registrar might not feel that way. IT might not feel that way. And so everybody gets into this interpretation of what FERPA should or shouldn't be. But the reality is most parents are logging in as their students, and it's happening with or without you. So at least if you are intentional about it, you can probably focus that over involvement on student retention. So hopefully that provides some context. There's more information on our website too if you're looking for more details there.
Great. Do you see family engagement decrease as a student's tenure at the institution grows? And if so, what is your recommendation on how to connect differently with second year, third year, fourth year parents?
Alex, you want to go first? I feel like we both are going to have a strong opinion on this.
Yeah, well, I guess the short answer is yes. I think we see an evolution of engagement, right? So in that first year, a lot of times they're clamoring for information. They're trying to figure it out alongside their student. And then that second, third year, they might be a little more hands-off, depending, right? I think this is very dependent on how that first year went for students. And then families kind of re-engage as their student is getting ready to launch into the next phase, whether that be grad school or a career. Families want to know, okay, how do I help them prepare for this? So absolutely, I think it's great for staff to think about how families are engaging and how you can be putting out different types of information targeted at those different stages in a student's career.
Yeah, and I agree. I mean, I think the word clamoring for information for first year families is absolutely the right descriptor. So Alex, I love that. It definitely, we see it go down second year slightly. It's still really high though. It goes down slightly second year, slightly third year. And then if you're at a four-year institution, it goes up fourth year around, the student graduation, thinking about jobs, next steps. And I will tell you, one of the biggest no-brainers that almost no schools do is involve career services in your parent engagement strategy. One of my favorite stories, he might even be on here, is from Chris Walter at Penn State Abington. They had a career fair and they were using Campus ESP. And I think something like the stat, like 40% more students showed up for this career fair. And they were like, oh, that's a lot, right? That's a lot of students. And the only thing they could point to, the only thing that they changed is that they sent out a message to parents about reminding their student to attend the career fair. That is super easy. You could use Campus ESP for that. And I hope you do use it for that, but you could also just send out an email. You could put it on social. That is like a no-brainer. And then it goes beyond that. Alex, you probably know this, having being at UCLA, but you can ask families for like, hey, any internships, any career opportunities, and you can be the hero of career services because you have access to families that, they might be very, tied in with their, if you think about the age of where they're at, tied into their careers and have access to that information. So I would say highest first year goes down, but then don't forget about those fourth year families. And they're also looking for next steps, like what's the next level of involvement? I know, Alex, you sit in advancement, right? I think you said. So you're probably thinking about, okay, how do we connect them into the UCLA community, and how do we, they could be a resource for the future as well.
Yeah, 100%.
Here's one I think that Dave's going to have an opinion about. Is a controlled parent communication forum best, or an open parent communication forum like a Facebook parent group?
Well, okay, this is going to be interesting. I think because I think Alex and I are going to disagree on this. So, like, let's. So we're both shifting in our seats here. I'll go first, and then Alex, you can get the final word on this. I think most of the families, when we survey them about social media, they are generally higher income earners. They are white families. You might not be reaching the populations you think you are on social. Specifically, to go back to that slide that we had earlier, Hispanic families, families making less income, first generation, they might not be on social as much as you think they are. So I think social's fine, but just know you might need a broader strategy. And for most of the schools that we talk to, maintaining social, like usually what we hear is it's 16 hours a week. And if you have student interns doing it, great. That is awesome. But if you don't have that, then it is a barrier for you. And then all it takes is one parent to put in a piece of misinformation, and then you're playing catch up. So in campus ESP, our difference versus social is if a parent makes a comment, they think they posted it to everybody, but it doesn't go out to everybody until you've had a chance to approve it. Generally, you can respond, but more often than not, parents might be oversharing there, and you can just respond to the parent directly. So if you can get social to work, great. I think what we generally hear is it's a lot of upkeep. So and Alex, you've been successful with it though. So would love to hear your take on it too.
Yeah, well, I want to acknowledge, we've been successful in having a page. We don't host any groups. I know some campuses do opt to do groups, and there's nuances for another webinar between pages and groups, but controlling the conversation is helpful, to your point of that one piece of misinformation gets out and then you're left playing catch up. So we allow folks to comment on our posts, but we don't allow anyone to just post to our page for, I think that exact purpose of not accidentally sending someone into a spiral over inaccurate information. So again, I think we could have a whole webinar on just social engagement, but I think also your data points around who is on social is really important. And yes, it cannot be the only way. So a balance of structured sources of information, some level of engagement is going to keep them there, but really creating some boundaries around that is going to be important, to your point. Again, I picture myself running after that misinformation comment, and that has happened, and it can happen.
Alex, we have a couple of questions here. People are just, I think, a little bit curious about your department at UCLA and how you guys are set up. Can you talk a little bit about your staff size, what department you fall under, and then maybe a little bit about your parent brand ambassador program?
Sure. Okay. We might have to circle back to all those questions, a couple questions all in one. So we sit in external affairs, specifically within alumni affairs. I think there's a lot of alignment there given the external facing work that we do. I know other campuses sit under enrollment services or, first year experience, or just generally in student affairs. I think there's benefits to all of those things, but for our purposes, I think we've seen a lot of great alignment sitting in alumni affairs. I do have a dotted line report over to student affairs, which creates a lot of really strong connections and collaboration when we have instances of a real struggle going on or some serious misinformation. I can kind of look over the fence and say, hey, colleague, give me the lowdown so I can help guide this family back, in the direction that they need to be going with their student. The second question you had, so our staff size, again, I oversee our parent and family engagement. We have 3 student organizations that sit within alumni affairs, and I support our board of directors. And so our full team is 8, including myself. But with regard to the parent family focus, it's about 1.5 to 2 people. And I say that because I'm also considering our student interns and the way we kind of structure that support. I think I missed
the brand ambassador program.
Brand ambassadors. Okay. So we have what's called our Parents Council. That's a group of about 165 core volunteers. I will just put an asterisk, that's taken 10 years to really grow that program out. So anyone who's desiring to do that, it is possible, but it's going to be a slow grow. And that group is one we provide a whole slew of tools, information, and access to different administrators to help us do our work. And so we plug them in, as I mentioned, to yield events, move-in weekend, family weekend. We're just getting them out in front of other families and helping spread the word of our office as a resource and the fact that families are part of the Bruin community.
Alex, I think that is another webinar because we hear questions about brand ambassadors all the time. And I think there's a lot of very early days for a lot of schools with that. And they're all thinking about that from an enrollment perspective as well, and not sure where to start. So maybe that's a future webinar too.
Sounds good.
I think we probably have time for one more question. I'm trying to, I don't like having the responsibility of choosing one of these here. What about this one? Would you, if you were building something from scratch today for parents at a university, would you want to build out your parents' office for current parents first, and then maybe adopt into the prospective side, or start with prospective and then move into the current family side?
That's like what, chicken or the egg? Yeah. It's really challenging. I think from the space of information, starting with current families is important. I think it's ensuring, and also using that as a feedback loop that you're putting out information that they need. So I would say, again, just from that information resource sharing space, starting with current families is a great place. I think if, again, going to build out volunteer programs and other sources of engagement, prospective families are where you're going to have the most opportunity because they're clamoring, right? They're clamoring for engagement. They're clamoring for information. So getting them early on to be part of and, experience the university alongside their student, that's a great place to start with the incoming folks.
Yeah, I agree with what you're saying. And I would, my whole team knows what I'm going to say, which is like, what problem are you trying to solve? I would start there, because family engagement for family engagement's sake, I don't know if it really makes total sense. Like, you've got to have something that it's tied back to, whether it's student success or enrollment or giving or some problem that you're trying to solve. And if you don't do that, then what you're going to find, I believe, is you're going to run into barriers internally where people are like, should we or should we not engage with parents? That's not the problem you're trying to solve, right? You're not going to change the world. The reality is parents expect communication weekly. That might be right, might be wrong. I don't know. You're just trying to respond to that and maybe focus that energy on something that's going to help your college or university. I think increasingly right now, especially if you think back to that map of the US with all those different like in red states, like it's enrollment. Enrollment is really the focus right now, especially for small private. But it could be giving. We see increasingly like people are looking at, parent giving. So I would just say, make sure you're solving a problem that is in the core mission of the college, of your college or university. And that's probably a great way to end it, I guess, because we're at the
pretty much that time, guys.
Thanks, Mel. Alex, thank you again. It's been great. Let's I feel like we should do this again at some point. So and maybe brand ambassadors, social media. I feel like social media, we could really peel some layers of the onion there. So thank you again for your time. Really appreciate it.
Absolutely. Well, and I know, again, it was hard to choose some of those last questions. If there are other questions, my contact information is available. I know, Dave, you made that available too. So happy to follow up with folks and take a deeper dive in any of that as well.
All right. Thanks, everybody. Thanks for joining us. We'll send you out the recording and the links and some additional materials. And we'll also have Alex and my emails in there as well. And Alex, have a great day. Thanks.
Thanks. Thank you so much.